So, this week we got BlizzCon. And while I was looking at it and seeing all the things that WoW is integrated into their game, it made me think, I've heard of this before. In Guild Wars 2. I've heard about this idea of rebranding your expansions as a saga before. The Iceberg Saga did the same thing. I've seen instances in the open world that scale to 1 to 5 people where you essentially have a dungeon in open world before and you're repurposing the assets and of course the map to have this. They were called DRMs, Down Response Missions in Guild Wars 2. I've seen bouncing mushrooms in Guild Wars 2. They were called bouncing mushrooms. And it makes me think, is WoW Guild Wars 2-fying everything in their game? I'm gonna show you why I think this is the case and why it's not a bad thing. And also, for last thing, why Guild Wars 2 is wowifying their own game as well. If you like content like this, subscribe to my channel, follow me on Twitch, all of those things. So first, what is these things that WoW is copying from Guild Wars 2? The main ones, honestly, let's be real, these are not contentious. Mythic Plus came from Fractals back in the day. System of dungeons with different levels that have different affixes, and the more you climb up, the harder they get. Sounds familiar to me. Now, I don't think there's anything wrong with that. They actually made a very good job with it. Honestly, a better job than what Guild Wars 2 did. But it obviously came from there. Fractals came out in 2012 after the launch of Guild Wars 2, and Mythic Plus came out in 2016 with the launch of Legion. So it is pretty obvious to say, I think, that, you know, Legion definitely got a bit of inspired with on Guild Wars 2's Fractal system. World quests back in Legion, of course, a way to trying to imitate what the events in Guild Wars 2 were. Maybe not the metas, but definitely the events. A system of world events that appear every few hours, randomized of course, with different rewards, different objectives that you can do alone or with multiple people. Sounds similar to something else. Honestly, they are definitely more like quests in WoW. Even though I think they definitely took something out of Guild Wars 2 to actually have this idea in the first place. I do definitely think that they did their own spin on it as well. So I'm not gonna say that they copied it completely, which maybe they should have, because I think most people would rather events in Guild Wars 2 than world quests in WoW. But there you go. Dragonflying in Dragonflight, of course, is a 1-to-1 comparison to the Griffin. We have seen videos about the comparisons between both of them. I actually think my opinion is that Griffin does it better in some ways, and Dragonflying does it better in other ways. You can go look at my video that I did a few years ago. Also, world events in Dragonflying are essentially trying to imitate what the metas are doing in Guild Wars 2. We have the Time Rifts, we have the Storm's Fury, we have Resurgence Under Fire, we have the Dream Surges. All of those things are trying to imitate what a meta in Guild Wars 2 is. If you don't know about this, they're essentially big trains of events that lead up into a big boss at the end. All of these ones that I mentioned for WoW are trying to do the same thing. Mushrooms on the Delves are obviously a comparison to Bastion Mushrooms in Heart of Thorns. Delves are obviously very, very similar to what DRMs were. Elites, oh yeah, the new hero talents are obviously as well a try to imitate elite specs in Guild Wars 2. Elite specs essentially transform your normal class into something else. Your Guardian into a Dragon Hunter with a new twist for fantasy and abilities. The Mesmer into a Chronomancer that manipulates time. In WoW, they're doing the same thing. You're not a Paladin anymore, you'll be a Templar. You will not be a Dragon Hunter anymore. Or a DK, you'll be a Rider of the Apocalypse, right? They might not have as cool abilities as these other things and redesign the class as much, but they will give you the flavor, the fantasy, and that's honestly, in my opinion, more important. And I hope Guild Wars 2 takes a little bit of a note on that, so they can, you know, find a way to give us that fantasy without having to, you know, redesign the whole class and make another elite spec. And naming each of the elite specs with cool names that make the flavor of the class so much more interesting. It really, really seems like they're grabbing these very good ideas that maybe don't make your endgame so much better, so much balanced, or so much more harder and engaging, but it gives you the flavor, the epicness, the engagement that you want in terms of the world, in terms of the fantasy, instead of your game, instead of the lore, everything, right? And more casual activities for people who don't raid, who don't do Mythic Plus, that they can engage with. They might not all have worked, but they are trying, and there is definitely, if not a complete copy, a influence from Guild Wars 2 and a desire from WoW to become very similar in those systems to Guild Wars 2. Guild Wars 2 has never been a game where their main focus has been instance content. It's always been casual content, horizontal progression, go build this race, this event, this meta, this adventure. All these things are not things that usually WoW would have. And sure, we have raids and stuff, but they're optional. And it seems like that's the same thing that WoW is doing, converting raids and Mythic Plus into obviously still part of the game and definitely important, but more of an option instead of a thing that you have to do. I also found it very funny that there's so many things that are kind of meme there. I don't think that they should take very seriously, but they're very, in terms of lore and what the game is about, is it's the same names that Guild Wars 2 has. For example, well, I mean, I guess the Void has always been here in Guild Wars 2 and many mini games as well, in WoW as well. But I find it so funny that both games are putting so much emphasis into the lore. From the Void, right? Same thing for like warbands. Warbands have been an important part of Guild Wars 2 char culture for a long time, and of course, that's also the name they chose for the little warband auto-friendly system. And also, one of the latest patches we got from Guild Wars 2 was called Jala Delves as well, which is a patch where you go into the depths to find Void. You go into the tunnels to defeat a Void creature, right? Just like what I'm sure that we're gonna do in the next expansion in WoW when we go into the delves or into, the zones that are under the earth. I find it so insanely an insane coincidence. I think it's honestly a coincidence. I don't think this was honestly done on purpose. Why would you do that? But I think it's so funny. Same thing for the Icewood Saga and the World Soul Saga. They were both ways of the companies to get more excitement about the game to their audiences that were a bit tired and scared of the future of their games. Now, the Iceberg Saga didn't really work out pretty well. It ended up fucking getting cancelled. But it was the same idea. A new type of content release with a new feature for the game. And I find it so funny as well that there's so many people that quit because of Iceberg Saga back in the day, went to WoW, and now the same thing is happening again to them. They must be honestly feeling like Blizzard is making fun of them. I don't even know. But regardless of that, where am I going with this? What am I saying that the game is becoming like Guild Wars 2? Well, the reason why I'm saying that is because all of these things that they're changing the game to are things that Guild Wars 2 does pretty well. All frontless, open world, casual content like dragon flying, like world events, like world quest. All these things are things that WoW didn't used to do that well, but they're actually investing in it very, very highly. Even on vertical progression, they're moving away a little bit to make it very easy for you to gear up and do the content, and moving more to horizontal progression. You have a crest that essentially reward you for most type of content to upgrade your gear, even if you got the gear from somewhere else. And it's cross-polish. You can get it from many, many types of content, or weekly by doing open world events. And now maybe with the warband, you'll be able to move them around. I would hope so, at least. But it's way, way more alt-friendly as well. Now with the warband, there's so many better ways to gear up that makes vertical progression way easier and faster. You can just do whatever you want, not think about, oh, I need to do this because of the gear, but instead I'm gonna do whatever I want and be rewarded anyways. Back in the day, it was raids. You have to do raids to get the gear. Maybe you have to do a few dungeons for specific items. Now it's, hey, do one weekly event here. Do this. Do a dungeon. Do a raid. Do this world event. Do this reputation renown to get some piece of gear. You have a lot of options in order to get your gear. And sure, if you just blast Mythic Plus, you'll get your gear very, very easily, but that's for the grinders. You still have the option to play whatever you want and get rewarded by it, which didn't used to be the case, with, honestly, casual content as well. And let's not say that Guild Wars 2 doesn't do the same thing. Guys, where do you guys think the Wizard's Vault came from? Yes, the trading points from WoW. Where do you think the new relic system came from? Trinkets in WoW. And it was very, very, very uncommon, or even it never, it never happened back in Guild Wars 2, that you would have to do one specific type of content to get one type of rune or gear, right? Now with relics, you have to do certain specific types of content to be able to unlock this very, essentially power for your class, which is in some ways some sort of vertical progression, but honestly, it's more like it's horizontal progression in another way, right? And it works pretty well. Now, of course, the relics need more development, and they have a lot of issues, but the idea is there, and the idea is good. And it obviously came from other vertically progression typed games like World of Warcraft. The same thing happened with strikes. Where do you guys think strikes came from? Yes, from Final Fantasy. One instance with one boss that you essentially have an easy mode and a normal mode and a hard mode that is also from the story. I wonder where that came from, especially considering the fact that Cameron, one of the guys that actually started developing this, and it was, I'm pretty sure it's confirmed that his idea, is a huge Final Fantasy 14 fan. Yeah, no shit. I think both games are changing a little bit of their philosophy and interchanging them a little bit. WoW is becoming more casual and getting more horizontal progression for people to choose what to do in the game. And Guild Wars 2 is definitely becoming a bit more vertical, a bit less free, a little sandboxy, in order to get a bit of, in order to make players know what the fuck to do in their game and be rewarded by doing those things. I think both games are actually learning from each other for what they do best, and I hope they continue, because honestly, I think Guild Wars 2 is my favorite game right now, favorite MMO. I think it is the best, but I also like WoW. It gives me things that Guild Wars 2 doesn't give me, and there's nothing wrong with it. Sure, you might, just because you have that one girlfriend, you have your wife, that doesn't mean you can't have friends to hang out with. It's the same thing with WoW, I think. For me, Guild Wars 2 is kind of my wife, but you know what? WoW is a very good friend. I know a good friend that I haven't played with in a long time, but now I'm coming back to it because honestly, everything seems pretty fun. And I hope they both continue learning from each other, becoming better games, and I'll be there to enjoy those games. Thank you very much for watching. Tell me if you think I'm completely wrong, and subscribe to the channel on Twitch as well. You can go to my Patreon if you want as well, if you like what I do. But there you go. See you guys around. Love you all. Bye-bye.